Hello and welcome to today's introduction to how to web scrape using R. My name is Alexander Bradley and I'm a teaching associate at Nottingham University, and I'm also working with Richard James, who is a postdoc at University of Nottingham. So without further ado, let's have a little think about what we're going to cover today. So today I want to talk about what is web scraping and why would you want to spend the time and the energy to actually bother to learn how to web scrape. So what's the point in doing it? What do web pages kind of look like behind the fancy things that we see when we click on our browsers? We're going to look at two free tools, how you kind of develop your web scraping. We're also going to have a think about how to use the site I've created to help you learn how to web scrape. And then we'll have a final note on ethics of web scraping before we end. So in essence, web scraping is also known by many different names as web harvesting, web crawling, or reverse engineering. And in essence, it allows the rapid collection and processing of a large amount of information from online sources, and this information can come in a variety of forms. It can be numerical, text, or collection of images or videos. And really, I guess the reason why you'd kind of want to do that is, I want to kind of process web scraping. Obviously, there's many reasons, but for scientists and for psychologists in particular, the World Wide Web is awash with phenomena that is relevant for psychologists to collect and to analyse. So there could be some really interesting hidden findings, some really interesting patterns that could really tell us a lot about some really big and important, interesting questions out there. So there are things, for example, like mental health forums, there's charitable giving sites, there's gambling sites that are awash with kind of information and data that will be on a scale that we're not used to dealing with in psychology or in other disciplines. So we typically used to have quite small sample sizes, but the data out on the real world is in the hundreds of thousands or hundreds of thousands, and it'd also be on a much greater time scale as well. So not just a cross-sectional study, potentially over years or over decades. The information on the web is mostly free to access, so even if you're somebody who hasn't potentially got research support or funding, you can still do really interesting kind of research on real world data, looking at interesting phenomena. And a lot of the information on the web is behavioural as well, so that helps us to move away from having to rely on self-report, which is only as accurate as a person who is self-reporting. And I guess the final sort of point on this note as well is that there's an awful lot of human interaction now that is going on online, whether it's through kind of our use of laptops or iPads or kind of mobile phones. A lot of our daily behaviour is going online. That's, I think, a trend that's going to keep on growing. So psychologists fail and scientists fail to kind of explore and analyse this online behaviour. We're really failing to explore and provide insight to an awful lot of human behaviour that's going on. So other kind of reasons that I think web scraping would be useful is actually learning how to web scrape isn't too tricky with a little bit of time. A little bit of patience, and I think I'm living proof of that fact. So you don't have to be a genius. It's absolutely achievable for everyone, especially with some of the fantastic, wonderful kind of software that there is now available to us. The actual process of building a web scraping script takes relatively little time, and yet it can collect an awful lot of data. So that's really handy. And if you had to collect that data manually, it would take weeks and months even, and it might not even be as accurate. So it can be a way of creating more reliable way of collecting data by creating a web scraping script, and also potentially a more replicable as well. So with all that said, it's time to move on, actually think about, well, what do web pages look like? What are they made up of beyond what we see in our web browsers like Google Chrome or Safari? So to answer that question, I guess generally they come in kind of two. I know that's an increasingly complex question. There's now more and more different kind of languages being used, but generally they come in two kind of forms primarily. The first is there's often some sort of markup language which really gives structure to the page. So it'll set out the page, or divide into different sections, and it'll put different bits of information in those different sections, and that's done by markup languages like HTML, Hypertext Transfer Markup Language, or XML, so Extensive Markup Language. Whilst the actual style of the page, so what makes it look kind of nice and pleasing on the eyes, is done by cascading style sheets, so CSS. Markup languages themselves, how they're kind of built or created, they often use things called tags and attributes, which we'll look at in a moment, to provide the structure and information to the computer to help generate that web page. So if we look a little bit closer about HTML, for example, HTML consists of pairs of tags which have an opening tag with often a keyword in there, with a keyword in there. So for example, a classic kind of is the head tag. So the tag is kind of displayed with kind of angular brackets and the keyword inside those angular brackets, and a closing tag. So there's an opening tag and there's a closing tag, and the closing tag often begins with the angular bracket and then a backslash and then the keyword, and then another angular bracket to close it. And then there'll be loads of information in between the opening and the closing tag. Now all tags are enclosed in these angular brackets, as I mentioned, and they often contain attributes, which basically just additional bits of information that the computer needs to help render the web page. So for example, the A tag, which stands for anchor, contains an attribute called the href attribute, which often contains links to either external websites or to images or videos that are stored. And at the top of most web pages, you can often find what's called a document type tag. So this is just informs the web browser of kind of what version of HTML or what kind of other markup language they've used, so what to expect basically. And often within that top of the web page, they'll often talk about kind of other tags. So for example, within the header tag, it often contains the title, it often contains metadata about the HTML page and other non-HTML scripts within that page. So all kind of HTML web pages have, pretty much all have kind of head tags at the top, which contains that information, and also body tags, which is where the majority of the actual information about the web page which is being kind of shown to you is stored. And body tags can contain a whole manner of things like text, pictures, links, tables and lists. So all those tags will then be contained within the opening and the closing body tags. This is just a little screenshot of an example of the website Selected Gadget and its web page. You can see at the top you've got the document type, and it tells you about HTML class there. You've got within that header tag you've got the title, and you've got the style sheet, and you've got some links to stuff, and then you've got the closing of the header tag, and then you've got the opening of the body tag, and you've got divisions and images and header tags and frames and paragraphs, etc. All within that body. You can see at the very bottom of the page, you can see that kind of body just down here. You can see the body closing body tag. So one last point just before I move on is that HTML is kind of a hierarchical structured language. So you often notice it's really quite indented here, and yeah, because I think the key point to take away from this is that because web pages have that kind of systematic, or most web pages have that systematic structure to them, it's that structure that allows you to then build web scrapers that identifies bits of information within that structure and then to systematically take out that information. So you can, for example, build a web scraper that will go across every page of thousands of pages or hundreds of pages and pull out identical information from each page, purely because the website has built in such a way that has a systematic approach to storing the information. And if it didn't have that, it'd be much more difficult to build these web scrapers, but thankfully most sites do, which makes it a lot easier. Now there are two really useful and free tools that we will need to use, so you must make sure you download them. First one is RStudios and R. So I definitely recommend clicking on the link or going to that particular website and downloading RStudios. So RStudios is kind of an integrated development learning environment which kind of sits on top of R, makes it a bit more easier and user friendly to kind of work through. So we'll actually have a little chat about the walkthrough about the RStudio environment in just a moment. And the other one we're going to use is Selected Gadget. That's a really useful, really important tool that will help us kind of extract the information from web pages, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. So big thank you then to Hadi Wickham for his package RVest, which we'll use mostly in these tutorials, and also to Andrew Platini and a chap called Kyle Maxwell who created Selected Gadget. So I'll just go to the first link, so RStudios, so you can see where you need to download it from. You can see on this site you can just click to download here, and then you can download for whatever kind of operating system you have and whatever version of the operating system you have the RStudios file. Once you have downloaded that and got that on your web page, you'll be able to find that you have something that looks a little bit like this. So I thought I'll just briefly talk through what this kind of is. So you've got your actual script here, up here, and then you've got your kind of environment over here. So this is where kind of variables information is stored, so data frames or kind of bits of information in vectors or kind of strings or character vectors might be over here, and then you've got over here in the bottom right kind of a number of different tabs here. So you can often type for help, for example, or you can install or kind of unload or load packages. Any plots you do will pop up here, and you can also navigate to files here. So for example, if we just run these lines here, so you run by going to this little run button up here, or you alternatively press Control and Enter. Oops, so daisy. Then you can see you've got some information that's popped up there. So that's just an example of some information there. And if you, for example, ran this line, then again you'd have more information popping up in your environment. And if you ever want to actually kind of work dynamically and test out code without putting it in the script, then you can always just type it into the console down here. So I can, for example, type print title, and then it's going to print out the information that's stored in that title vector. And you can see that title vector is a character vector, which has 3 elements, 1 to 3. So then print that out for us, so you can see the results of what your code's actually doing. But anyway, we'll talk through this more because in example 1. That's just to give you a feel for the RStudio's environment. The other thing to mention then is select a gadget. So this is definitely worth kind of installing. So you can simply install it by just clicking on, just install the Chrome extension here. And it's a Chrome extension that you can access. It comes just in the top right hand here. It's this little robot arm with a magnifying glass. And that can be very useful to help you pull out various bits of information. But I definitely recommend watching this video here done by Andrew Cantino, who talks about how to use Select a Gadget. And it's really useful tool that we use throughout this tutorial examples on the website. So I just want to talk a little bit more about how to use the site. So the site is a very basic website to help you get started on your web scraping journey. This is done for a reason. It's kept basic, it's kept very simple, no frills, just to help you kind of get grips with kind of web scraping. And you can access that site by clicking on the link here. And when you do that, you should find that the website opens up here, and this is what the website looks like. So we've got a little bit of information here and about the different examples. There's 3 main examples, but I might add others as time goes on. And you'll be able to find the examples here. So the examples kind of increase in difficulty and in what they ask you to do. And there's also accompanying each example an exercise as well. I'm going to put videos up of these examples. You should be able to find on this home page. I haven't added them yet. And for all the example scripts, you can also find those and download the example scripts on the OSF website, the Open Science Framework website. And you can see the example scripts are there to download. So I definitely recommend, as a way to kind of use this site, to download the R scripts and watch the videos. And once you've understood the video and you've understood what the script does and you ran it, then I think it's a great time to have a go at those exercises that accompany those examples. That's probably the best way to try and learn and use this site to help you learn. Just before we go, I just thought it was important to mention some sites will contain something called a robot text files, which set out particular rules about what you are or what you're not allowed to scrape. Most information on the web is publicly available and open for everyone. However, information behind usernames and passwords is probably protected, so it's probably best not to scrape that, although again things can be done on a case-by-case basis. It might be the fact that you have got in touch with the owner of the website and they've given you access or allowed you to do that, in which case that's fine. It's also good practice to only scrape what you need, so don't take too much information, only take out the bits of information that you need for particular ideas or projects that you want to test out. It's also nice to put delays between your calls to the web page, as this will prevent it getting kind of too overcrowded or too busy and potentially causing a denial of service kind of attack, which would be bad. So try to not do that. So try to put calls in, and again we'll show you how to put those calls in within our examples, so that's not a problem. Here's just some useful resources. So you've got the RBEST manual, Select a Gadget, and you can also learn a lot about HTML or CSS, as you mentioned, from w3schools.com. So thank you very much. That's all I've got time for in this particular video.